welcome to this panel on the pathway to programmatic TV. My name is Lindsay Rowntree. I'm head of content at ExchangeWire, and I'm delighted to be joined by my esteemed panel, far more expert than I am in this, who are going to hopefully help explain, define what programmatic TV is, how it scales, what its opportunities and challenges are, and what the future of this medium within the broader TV landscape looks like. So we'll kick off with introductions. Silvia, I'm going to come to you first, please.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm Silvia Broggi. I'm International Marketing and martech Director for Publitalia, the advertising sales house of Mediaset Italy.
Thank you, Silvia. Lara, over to you.
Hi, I'm Lara Izlan, Director of Advertising Data and Analytics at ITV, UK's largest commercial broadcaster. My team's remit is basically the data and insight, targeting products and measurement solutions for advanced advertising.
Brilliant. Andre.
Good afternoon. I'm Andre Swanston. I'm the CEO of TruOptik, a TransUnion company, and we provide most of the identity resolution and third-party data marketplace for connected TV in the United States.
And congratulations, Andre, on your recent news of becoming a TransUnion company. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
And finally, Austin.
Hi, I'm Austin Scott. I lead video market development across Europe. I'm based in London, and Xandr's kind of initiative around helping the buy, the sell, or the curator become more successful in video and television and CTV is kind of the hope and the direction that we think Europe is heading in. So happy to be here.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. So I want to kick off by defining programmatic TV. And it feels like a really obvious question because it feels like we should all know what programmatic TV is and does. But in a world where we're talking more and more about OTT and CTV and HTTP TV and IPTV, there's too many names, too many acronyms. I feel like the word programmatic is getting lost along the way. So I'm interested to hear from each of you how you each define programmatic TV, because I feel it could be different. So Andre, we're going over the US first. I want to hear from you how you're defining programmatic TV.
The funny thing is, in the US, we don't use the term programmatic TV quite as much. I think everything has gone so quickly towards connected TV, and about 20% of connected TV in the US is bought programmatically. But I don't think that over the last year or two, we've seen as much as a differentiation in terms of whether people are executing their buy through a direct buy that runs on connected TV or programmatically. It's been more advanced TV, connected TV, the jargon. What I think is interesting, one of the partnership announcements that we just made recently was our data marketplace, which is mostly used for connected TV, is going to be powering Nielsen's new addressable ad replacement solution on linear to smart televisions. And then you also have people that are using identity resolution for addressable targeting to satellite boxes and cable boxes. I think as more of that is automated in a programmatic way in the US, which it's definitely growing, and you go from 20% of connected TV and very little of the others being bought in a programmatic way, I think the term will probably be used more. So I think going back to the original question from definition wise, I think it's just kind of any automated way to access television inventory, whether that is dynamic ad replacement, connected TV, or addressable on a set-top box. And that's what I think will settle across the industry as the term.
Interesting how you refer to it across the industry, because we talk about CTV quite a lot, and when we do refer to it on a more global basis, it stems off insights and examples from the US. So interested to hear kind of what your stance is on that terminology and how it's evolving with what the other panelists will say as well. So I'm going to go back to the UK now with Lara. How is ITV defining programmatic TV in this context?
So Lindsay, first thing to say is you're absolutely right. We are acronym-tastic, I think, in TV. I've now been, in TV coming from other media for almost 2 years now. And, the first challenge was actually getting all those acronyms right. And actually in the midst of all that complexity, I think our view on programmatic is in a way going back to the basics. So I've, personally worked in programmatic for about 10 years, not as long as some, but long enough to remember the original promise of programmatic, and I'm thinking, the promise was automating media processes so we could connect buyers and sellers without all the efficiencies that, that we had in the middle. It was about, how we apply data to improve advertising effectiveness, both from a targeting perspective, but also from an insights and measurement perspective. It was about supply demand economics so that we can create fair and optimal pricing for our inventory. And it was about giving buyers and sellers more flexibility. I remember, I remember this very clearly. It was about having more control over how we sell our inventory, and buyers more control in terms of how they could, launch their campaigns. And to me, I think, these were the original promises of programmatic. And from an ITV perspective, and with the launch of Planet V, a new addressable media platform, those are the underlying ambitions that we're trying to address with programmatic in TV, to bring back that original promise, to overlay that on TV, which we know has so many different benefits, and to really sort of bring those benefits to buyers.
Interesting. And Silvia, I want to come to you next to hear it from the Italian point of view. By the way, I'm loving your background. I'm trying to watch all the different TV screens behind you, not be doing. But how are you defining programmatic TV in Italy and at Pub Italia specifically? Because obviously Italy is a market where programmatic TV and connected TV isn't quite as advanced as other markets. So is it a term that you're referring to? How is it being brought up in conversation?
Okay, well, programmatic is a trading model where automation is leveraged to get and to gain efficiency to medium like TV, which is the most powerful medium. So programmatic TV is just automation applied to even TV inventory, being it OTT, native apps or HbbTV, or as Andre was saying, ad replacement on linear television. So it means applying efficiency to advertising, to TV advertising. And it's in Italy, we're starting talking about programmatic TV. It's an unavoidable trend, but not yet fully received.
Mm. And Austin, I'm interested in your perspective. Obviously, Xandr is a global company, and your remit is EMEA. Do you think that we need to dissociate ourselves in the TV industry from the word programmatic as it pertains to traditional RTB and display? We've heard Andre, Silvia, and Lara all talk about automation. Is that what programmatic TV defines in the new TV landscape?
I think that the idea of the data-driven television, automation of television buying, and then that third component really can be more the real-time bidding. And that probably is the piece for things that are more akin to linear TV experiences is not really there yet. So it's just really nice to kind of see the momentum. But I think a lot of times, say the US to Europe kind of conversion stuff doesn't happen because of the definitions being so different. So programmatic TV in the US was actually a term that like TubeMogul would refer to, and it was just sort of IO based managed buys that weren't exactly, transacting on these three pillars we've talked about, and they deprecated that business. So when you kind of think about it over here, some of the underlying technology for television is different and would almost make it more like likely or attainable. So I think that that's kind of the momentum is there, but I think it does take time to kind of do that. So programmatic, with its successes in scale of display, I think people can really take the flexibility, the optimization, the efficiencies, but actually need to take a step back and view what is the broadcaster or the media owner's problem, challenges, what are buyers and sellers trying to do, and then how do you do that through these devices? There's devices, there's services, and then there's kind of the viewer that wants a good experience, that wants relevant ads. And so it's nice because there was always right time, right place, right ad, kind of a motto in programmatic. And I think that that's there, but there's kind of so much more possibility that's yet to be explored. like moment advertising. So something happens in a show and, you know, say your sports team wins and then, you know, brought to you by your favorite beverage company. That's a much more impactful kind of experience for the brand as well as the viewer. But then technically pulling that off is still probably some kinks to work through.
Yeah, that's interesting. Lara, how close are ITV to being the moment broadcaster? It's a term that we used probably 5-6 years ago. There's a lot of kind of companies out there that were doing a lot of moment advertising. It feels like it's fallen by the wayside a bit. But is that something that this promise of programmatic TV, if you like, could bring to the table eventually for you guys?
It's certainly something we're working on, and not just us, but other broadcasters as well. You know, I think one of the main barriers to, you know, truly realizing that from a, you know, a codified or programmatic automated way, however you want to call it, is the availability of the metadata. So we've done some early prototypes using, you know, open source APIs, video scanning APIs, etc., so that we can actually codify, not scene by scene, but second by second, you know, what you can see in a program, or indeed even an advertising campaign, tagging all of that up, you know, making sense of the tags. All of that is quite a bit of work, even in the digital space. So then sort of applying that to linear as well, that's when you start to kind of think about how much data you need and the infrastructure that you need to be able to capture that in the first instance, and then making all of that data usable. So, you know, that we've certainly seen some, you know, we've certainly been prototyping and been seeing some initial success with that. But, you know, we need to be able to, you know, collect that level of metadata at scale, make it usable for that to really be, you know, applied to programmatic. If I could also just pick up quickly on something Austin said, I think you know, you're absolutely right in terms of, you know, the benefits of programmatic that we can lend into TV landscape. But I think it would be wrong of us not to acknowledge that, you know, we've also seen lots of failures and lots of challenges in the programmatic landscape over the last 10 years. You know, I mean, I've had firsthand knowledge from a media owner side of things. You know, I mean, you can list them all off, like the over-reliance on cookies, data leakage issues, suboptimal supply chains, excessive daisy chaining, confusion over price models. So I think, you know, when we look back and look at what we can bring forward into programmatic for TV, I think we also need to look at the failures, and we have an opportunity now that we're bringing programmatic into a very large medium, you know, to do it properly, to do it right. And I think that's, you know, that's sort of the approach that we're taking with Planet V. So it's not, you know, kind of all singing, all dancing programmatic from, you know, the kind of display definition, but it's about, you know, taking as much of those learnings and making sure that we create a platform that is fit for purpose.
Yeah, I think we're all romantics in ad tech, aren't we? We remember the good times and completely brush aside the really bad times. Andre, that leads actually very nicely into what I want to ask you, which is about the data of programmatic TV and in this cookieless environment. Do you think that we have the opportunity to, because programmatic TV is a bit of a laggard compared to other digital channels, do we have the opportunity to remove the bad elements and improve them before we bring them to market? How can we play in that environment when it comes to data, identity, and this kind of cookieless world that we can operate in?
Yeah, first I'll say yes, as I do believe that I think there's a lot less noise in, you know, and I'll talk more specifically about connected TV, because that's where I think there's the most scale of the amount of advertisers and publishers and households that can be reached in the US anyway, in terms of data-driven targeting across the television. And there, you know, we launched the first data marketplace in the US for connected TV back started beta testing in 2016. And one of the things that was an issue then was when you did have data, and we worked with just a handful of large data partners back then. Obviously we have much more now, but the big challenge was scale, right? So it wasn't, you know, the quality of data, I believe, has been there from day one, in terms of not having to deal with the billions and billions of fake cookies that are bots, or a lot of the issues that have been there across traditional digital. But the big challenge was the scale wasn't there. So as soon as you started filtering an audience by household income and then geographical location, all of a sudden you couldn't fill any actual campaign. So the money wasn't there. I think what has really changed over the last 3 years and even over the last 6 to 8 months with COVID and social distancing and staying home is the just massive amount of scale that's available. So you do have the ability to go into a single media market and look at households with over only $100,000 of income that are in market for a pickup truck. And you can do that very regularly. And in fact, multiple advertisers, different competing advertisers, a Toyota and a Chevy and others could all do that at the same time. And there's still enough inventory. I think where there's challenges to the second part of your question across identity is because the money is all the audience and now thus the money is all shifting to connected TV. Everybody has an identity resolution, capability. Everybody has, claims to have a graph and a way to map data. And what the challenge is that we've seen that has caused issues for clients and partners is when they're leveraging solutions that were built for the cookie world and are really trying to just retrofit legacy solutions to an environment that's very different. You're talking about household level reconciliation and targeting as opposed to individual. You may have multiple devices of different brands in the same household. So you could have a Apple TV in the living room and a Samsung in the bedroom. And so that's where I think the differentiation for TruOptik and what we're doing in terms of we were always built to have the household graph and always built to be cookieless and are agnostic relative to the device or the publisher. And I think the big issue over the next 6 months to a year is going to be kind of the same weeding out that had to happen in terms of a decade ago when everybody claimed they did mobile. And they didn't, or 15 years ago when everybody had a cookie-based data marketplace, but only a few survived. I think that same kind of natural selection will happen, and some of the pretenders won't be around much longer.
Well, we shall see about that. It'll be the year of programmatic TV for the next 10 years now. Guarantee you that for nothing. But Austin, are you seeing EMEA? What's the conversations you're having with clients and with broadcasters and with buyers alike about programmatic TV in general and the identity within that and how identity plays out in that environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see the trend and maybe like Lara was saying, some of the learnings from programmatic is that the way to solve some of the challenges that came up was bringing the buyer and seller closer, or like allowing for people to, do programmatic guaranteed deals or kind of make their relationships more firm. So the kind of decentralization, I guess, of data sharing. So something like an InfoSum where the media owner can bring their data and the marketer can bring their data and safely share that. That's the most kind of straightforward, getting exactly what I'm intending to get way. For any other sort of extensions of that or probabilistic AI sort of ways to expand from that, those are kind of evolving, but I wouldn't say that there's sort of this infallible graph. We definitely explored a lot of different options, and we do see that one of pretty much bringing those two together is probably, publisher PII kind of data is the most accurate. So I think there's, in Europe had a different challenge with some GDPR. So it's definitely, like Andre saying, like a different kind of scale problem too. There's 60 million kind of connected television homes, depending on how you're defining it. So the US, that's half of the US, and that's many countries involved.
Yeah, that's very true. Speaking of that, Silvia, I want to come to you next, because obviously in a market where connected TV is still very nascent, what are the barriers that you're finding? Kind of what needs to happen in Italy for you to see some kind of meaningful scale over the next few years?
Well, the Italian market is very peculiar because TV hasn't stopped being the favorite medium for viewers and advertisers. So moving from an over-the-counter selling method to programmatic is a kind of a cultural shift. And needs some time because television is still traded successfully in the traditional way. So it needs to will be bringing disruption in a successful trading model. We started 3 years ago selling addressable advertising on connected TV successfully, but basic conditions for programmatic TV would be to have more inventory addressable, to have targeted campaign, and this is subordinated to distribution of TV set, which is still very limited. We have almost 30% of Italian households who has a connected television, and we expect with the switch off the DVB-T in 2022 to have a push in distribution, and of course with the 5G we'll have higher availability of data, so it will be easier to deliver advertising campaign in programmatic. And of course publisher will have to make supply available in programmatic, and broadcaster will have to set rules and set standards to make programmatic successful, and not to have the same errors and mistakes that have been made in the digital space. So
very interesting. It's amazing, we're running out of time, shocking, but I do want to touch upon the big thing that affects the TV industry, that any kind of digital emancipation of it is going to impact is regulation. So TV is one of the most regulated industries when it comes to any kind of consumer media, and obviously the regulation is very, very different from market to market. So Andre, for example, in the US, I mean, every time I go to the US, I'm just shocked by the pharmaceutical ads that you have on TV versus what we're allowed in the UK, which is almost nothing. But that's one kind of minor point, one minor thing I've noticed. But I'm interested into how regulation, what role regulation will play in the scalability and the future and evolution of CTV, according to each of you. So Andre, again, I go to the US and I'll start with you, kind of what role regulation plays and how it will continue to play out.
I think it's going to play an important role. The big difference between the U.S. and Europe is in the U.S. now with CCPA, which is a California rule that pretty much everybody's just then put in place across the country in terms of on the tech and capability side. It's you have to give consumers the ability to opt out as opposed to GDPR, where you have to opt in. So very, very different from that standpoint. I think we will continue to see more regulation come in terms of rights to be forgotten and information rights, and different states are doing different things. So we're waiting for some federal ruling on that. But we've been very proactive about the ability for people to have privacy control. Also uniquely looking at the household level. That's another thing that's different about television as opposed to a laptop or a mobile phone, where you're opting out at an individual level. You know, if I opt out the Roku in my bedroom, you know, what happens to the Xbox in the kids' room? Are those opt-out controls still honored? And so I think there's going to be more household privacy requirements when it comes to television as opposed to individual. And that's kind of what we've planned towards, and we'll see if that happens.
Interesting. Austin, from your perspective, sitting across Europe and EMEA, how do you think regulation, how can programmatic play in this, in a very regulated ecosystem?
Well, one kind of thought that comes to mind is that, like, in the US, there are heavily regulated industries. So I saw on one side, you would see a finance or an insurance brand be really, really heavy in DR metrics when it came to their buying habits and how they approached campaign performance. And that was because, like, the rates are going to be set at a government level, and they can't, use price points to compete. So those are some of the biggest companies that do branding and, like, the most engaging and exciting creative, the Allstate duck and stuff. But the other thing about regulation is that regulation can be, you know, like health and safety and spur innovation. So like the auto industry, you know, wants better fuel efficiency in the cars. And I think there's a really, as far as what programmatic can do, it can probably optimize within a given set of parameters, and regulation would be those parameters. As far as how they actually end up getting set and translated into the digital world, I'm really curious to see how that plays out. And I think probably the media owners and TV can give more of a thought on the progression. You know, it took many years to probably build up what is now known as the TV regulatory bodies of every country. So I can't imagine it being a flip of a switch, but it would have big impacts on how people are able to optimize, you know, viewers' time, you know, because that's really what we're optimizing when we're delivering TV ads, and is the time with the user, the time with the viewer.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Silvia, I'm interested to find out, kind of from Italy's perspective, how regulated is the Italian market for TV at the moment, and will programmatic coming into force make that cause increases in regulation, or will it be able to play quite nicely alongside what is currently a regulated market?
Well, traditional TV industry is highly regulated in Europe and in Italy too, and data as well. We cannot collect data freely. We are under GDPR, so there is no much availability of data as in the US. So this is a kind of a barrier, but I think we will need to keep the quality and the rules of TV and protect TV as a medium. And what we are doing in Mediaset and in Publitalia, we are trying to apply TV rules also to connected TV. So we are trying to keep and be in line with what already television impose as protection of minors or alcoholic in some programming. So we try to stick with the TV regulation. So I think this will be the line we need to keep. And of course, there will be the necessity to work together as a TV industry to fix rules and limits.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lara, finally to you, I'm interested in how you're seeing that play out at the moment at ITV and in the UK more generally. What role regulation plays in the advancement of programmatic TV and CTV?
Sure. I think the point Silvia just made on collaboration is a huge one. I think in the UK and probably in other markets across Europe, broadcasters and TV have a very good track record actually of collaborating. We think about Barb and ThinkBox and other initiatives. And all of those different, organizations are on point in terms of trying to figure out how, we move from, a broadcast first type of medium to an IP first medium, which is definitely coming. I think the other point about, regulation into programmatic, actually just the process of digitizing or codifying those rules and regulations and requirements is a very useful one. Just to kind of put those almost, things that people have, TV industry has known all their lives, someone who's been working in TV all their lives, but actually putting it down in code is a very interesting process because it's very illuminating in terms of where, how things actually fit together. So that's a really good process. And I think, ultimately is a very, will bring benefit to the industry overall, because if it's done correctly, then all of a sudden, we have mechanism to add efficiency to the process. Digitization will allow us to do that. It can help significantly with quality control. And then also, I think most importantly, and someone else also mentioned this, having it codified and in a programmatic way allows us to apply experimentation much more, in a much more agile way and at scale, so that we can actually make continuous improvement. So I think from that point of view, it's worth the effort kind of trying to, translate those rules and regulations into programmatic settings.
Absolutely. As Austin said, regulation forces you to innovate. And actually we could find that from regulation, particularly so much regulation cross-market, it could bring about some wonderful innovation as programmatic TV, as CTV continues to scale. So it's going to be a really interesting space to watch. I'm afraid we've run out of time, but it's been so good chatting to you. I think it could have been one that could have been lasted much longer than it has done. So thank you so much, Silvia, Andre, Lara, and Austin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.